Take a look at these two faces. Who are they? Perhaps you know the man on the right, an icon of sport. Or perhaps you recognize the man on the left, an important person in culture. Maybe you know both, or let's be honest, maybe you recognize neither. But now, don't say anything. We will come back to the photos later. A few months ago, I was participating in an international project where I had a conversation with a guy from Italy. Let's call him Bruno. We were playing a game where the task was to discuss the most popular things about our countries, and I can tell you I was excited for the game. So naturally, I started with borscht. I mean, who doesn't know what borscht is, right? And then our talk got a little more serious and led us to famous people. So during my small monologue about famous Ukrainians, I asked Bruno, you know Shevchenko, right? And by asking that, I was not sure what answer to expect, hoping that Bruno will say yes and I will continue my thought. So Bruno nodded enthusiastically and said, yes, of course, which made me a bit surprised, but honestly delighted. So I started talking about Shevchenko, the one whose first name is Taras Shevchenko. I told Bruno about his accomplishments within literature and art, and as I kept sharing bits and pieces about Taras Shevchenko's biography, Bruno's face went from enthusiastic to confused and lost by the end. I kept wondering what's wrong, did I mispronounce something? And when my speech came to a halt, Bruno looked me in the eyes and asked, I didn't know there were two Shevchenkos in Ukraine. I know the one who's famous football player, Andriy Shevchenko, not Taras Shevchenko, right? I smiled weakly and we laughed off this misunderstanding. But there are moments when we see what we want to see, right? And that was the exact moment for me. I understood that Bruno sees that part of Ukraine that is loudly demonstrated and vibrant. The rest, the literature, the history, the ghosts, they remain deep down the books and dust. The problem is that there is a significant gap between how Ukrainian identity is seen internally as in culture and history and externally as how media represent it globally. And that comes with consequences. People have whether a misleading or fragmentary perception of Ukraine and its identity, which leads to simplified labels, roles, or stereotypes about Ukraine. In other words, a shortcut identity. But why does it happen like this? After analyzing some resources and looking back several years ago, I've noticed that the rise of interest in Ukraine happened after the start of full-scale invasion in 2022. From Ukraine's Global Perception Report of 2024, you can see how often Ukraine was Googled during the period of time from 2004 to 2025. So it is no surprise that people that have never watched football before 2022 may not know a thing about Ukraine. Here you can also see the most popular topics in articles about Ukraine in 2024. It is not hard to notice how topics are mostly about war and that football consistently ranks at the top of the list. This is also a good example of simplification, as Ukraine constantly appears in the same context for the news consumers. Don't you agree? But the situation gets worse when it comes to misinformation. The rise of AI and lack of media literacy allow fake news to change how we see entire countries. By spreading false stories, misinformation replaces a nation's real identity with a dishonest image of chaos or corruption. This fake content often uses emotional topics to trigger people's feelings and prevent us from seeing the truth and cause us to judge a nation based on fiction rather than reality. So with all this hustle and bustle we face online every day, people decide to just avoid news at all. According to the Digital News Report 2024 by Reuters Institute, news avoidance has risen to 39%, which means that nearly 4 in 10 people worldwide deliberately avoid news. That is because many people feel overwhelmed by the information online and trust in news is declining, especially for people that live in countries that face economical or political instability. Considering all these obstacles, it is still possible to get to the bottom of the truth and immerse yourself in Ukrainian picturesque culture without missing out on the modern news and trends. For the takeoff of your journey, you should start with something easy. Let's call the first method the sieve habit, which means stop, investigate, and verify. So the next time you see a viral headline or a shocking video in Instagram or TikTok about Ukraine or any other country you don't live in, don't let it be your only data source. Before you hit like or let that post form your opinion, try doing a 30-second sanity check. Open Google and search for that same information from local source or a reputable international media. By doing this, you're becoming not just a passive consumer, but a reality checker and gaining new skills of media literacy. This small digital habit acts as a filter and stops AI-generated lies or propaganda from becoming our personal opinion. The second thing you can do is echo chamber cleaning. In order to stop seeing Ukraine through a shortcut, you have to change who speaks into your ears. And most of us follow global news giants that summarize events in Ukraine in 60-second clips. So for the next 6 months, I want you to intentionally follow 3 Ukrainian subject matter experts that do a blog about niche things you fancy and genuinely interested in. Find a Ukrainian urbanist, a Ukrainian fashion designer, or a Ukrainian historian. Don't look for just Ukraine content, look for Ukrainian expertise. So when you see an urbanist discussing accessibility in Kyiv or a fashion designer talking about sustainable linen, you stop seeing Ukraine as a topic and start seeing it as a producer of value. Yes, it takes time and discipline to build your feed this way, but I can tell you this is the only way to build a mental map that is deep, permanent, and almost impossible for fake news to erase. For the third magic trick to widen the horizons, I decided to do some research, and I have a question for you. How much time do you think you need to spend with a person to call him or her your friend? Well, I don't have an answer for this question, but I can tell you that the more people know a country, its history and achievements, the more likely they are to view it positively, no matter they visited the country itself or not. A vibe check is something close to that. To get to know Ukraine, take out your phone, open search tab or even TikTok. Now type in whatever you're into, maybe it's literature, visual arts or indie rock. Now just add the word Ukraine and hit search. Look at what pops up. If you see a bookshop in Kyiv, a photo gallery in Odessa or a band from Lviv, that's the real vibe and a friend that needs only 10 seconds. You just skipped the headlines and found a human connection, and that's how it's done. Whenever a headline feels too simple or a story feels like a stereotype, run a vibe check or do a sieve habit. Don't let a shortcut be the only version of Ukraine you know. Those 3 steps can make a difference on your perception of Ukraine and show that nothing is one-sided. So now it's only up to you, whether you want to dig deep or stay on the surface. Slava Ukraini!